We are counting down the 10 sailboats that insurance companies are refusing to touch in 2025. From iconic bluewater cruisers with hidden hull flaws to classic designs sunk by paperwork and geography, these models earned their spots on the blacklist for reasons insurance underwriters will not ignore. You will see how a single blister, a buried tank, or even your zip code can turn a dream yacht into a financial trap. Some entries are legends of the cruising world, now uninsurable liabilities. Which model was just declared too risky to cover at any price? Let us begin at number 10. The Valiant 40 was built between 1976 and 1981, and it still draws offshore dreamers. For insurers, those years spell trouble. The problem sits deep in the hull. A fire-retardant resin intended to slow flames instead triggered what owners call the POX, systemic and relentless blistering. Surveyors haul these boats out and tap across fields of blisters, sometimes finding fluid weeping from the laminate. For underwriters, it is an actuarial nightmare. Any sign of active POX in a recent haul-out survey is enough to halt hull coverage. The repair is not cosmetic. Full remediation means stripping the entire underwater hull, drying it, and rebuilding the laminate, a job that can cost more than the resale value. On a typical late 1970s Valiant 40, that often leaves an $80,000 asset uninsured. Most insurers, when faced with a fresh survey showing advanced blistering, simply decline hull coverage. The owner is left to self-insure, carrying only liability insurance to satisfy marina requirements. One chemical choice, 40 years ago, now turns a blue water icon into a financial risk few will touch. CNC's Landfall 38 stands out for its sleek lines and its reputation as a fast cruiser, but beneath the waterline, there is a problem that makes underwriters uneasy. The hull is balsa cored below the waterline, a design meant to save weight and boost performance. Over time, any poorly sealed fitting or through hull can let water creep in. Balsa does not just get damp, it soaks up moisture and holds it, spreading rot and weakening the bond between core and fiberglass. Surveyors attack these hulls with moisture meters and percussion hammers, mapping grids of readings and listening for the dull thud that signals delamination. When high readings show up, insurers want proof, sometimes demanding infrared thermography or even spot core samples to confirm the damage. The cost of cutting out and recoring a wet hull often exceeds the boat's value. For many Landfall 38s, a survey showing widespread core saturation means hull coverage is declined or the policy comes with a structural exclusion. Unless there is clear evidence of a dry core, buyers are left self-insuring a boat that could peel apart from the inside. Hartley 32 owners know the pitch, affordable, sturdy, and ready for adventure. But the moment insurers see the word Ferrocement on an application, the process stops cold. Ferrocement hulls, steel rebar, and mesh locked inside a cement shell were a favorite of backyard builders in the 1970s. The problem is no surveyor can see what is happening inside. Rusted rebar might be eating away at the boat's strength, and there is no way to check without destructive testing. That uncertainty is too much for mainstream underwriters. Most carriers have a categorical no ferro box on their guidelines. There is no negotiation, no special survey, just a flat refusal for hull coverage. At best, a specialty insurer might offer liability only, but that leaves the owner exposed for any real loss. With resale values already low, the financial risk is moderate, but the chance of finding full insurance from a standard market is nearly zero. For insurers, Ferrocement is not just a red flag, it is a closed door. Whitby 42 buyers often discover a problem buried deep below the waterline. The original black iron fuel tank sits inside the keel cavity, hidden under layers of structure and the engine itself. After 4 decades, corrosion inside that tank is almost guaranteed. Surveyors know the drill. Any sign of leaks, rust, or contamination in the bilge is flagged as a major safety and environmental risk. Insurers do not see a maintenance headache. They see the potential for a diesel spill in a crowded marina and a pollution claim that can quickly outstrip the boat's value. Fixing a failed keel tank on a Whitby 42 is not a quick job. The work means hauling the boat, pulling the engine, cutting open the cockpit sole or even the hull, removing the old tank, and custom fabricating a replacement. Yard bills regularly land in the $15,000 to $25,000 range, and that is if nothing else breaks along the way. Most underwriters, when faced with a survey that calls the tank corroded or condemned, will not offer hull coverage until it is replaced. Some may write a policy with a strict exclusion for any loss involving the tank or pollution. More often, buyers are left with liability-only coverage, just enough to satisfy the marina, but with no protection for the hull or cleanup if the tank lets go. On paper, the Whitby 42 is a proven cruiser. In practice, a buried iron tank turns it into a financial anchor unless there is fresh documentation and a clean survey. Choi Lee's Clipper 42 draws attention at the dock with sweeping lines and classic teak decks. But beneath that bright work, the insurance file reads like a warning. The deck is teak planking, each strip fixed with hundreds, sometimes thousands of screws, all driven straight through the fiberglass into a plywood core. Every screw is a potential leak, and over decades water finds its way in. The result is widespread core rot, hidden until surveyors start tapping and probing for soft spots. Moisture meters often light up in grids across the deck, and the telltale sound of a dead thud spells trouble. Repair is not a matter of swapping out a few boards. Full remediation means stripping the teak, cutting out rotten plywood, rebuilding the core, and re-glassing the surface. It is a labor-intensive process that can run $40,000 or more on a boat worth less than that on the open market. For insurers, this is a textbook case of constructive total loss. When the cost to fix the deck exceeds the insured value, the boat becomes a financial write-off. Most carriers will demand proof of a dry, sound core in the latest survey or simply add a deck exclusion to the policy. If the surveyor calls out active rot, hull coverage is usually declined. The owner is left with liability only, just enough to keep a slip, but nothing if the deck fails. For the Clipper 42, dreams of adventure run aground on a spreadsheet, repair bills outpacing resale, and a deck that is more risk than asset. Benetto's first 456, especially the early generation, carries a risk that makes underwriters sweat. The design relies on mild steel bolts buried inside an iron keel, holding thousands of pounds of ballast to the hull. Over decades, salt water finds its way past aging seals and into the threads, where corrosion works unseen. The danger isn't cosmetic, it is catastrophic. Keel bolt failures have led to high-profile accidents on similar production cruisers, some ending in total loss or worse. For insurers, the question isn't whether the bolts will corrode, but whether anyone can prove they have not already. A standard survey will not cut it. These days, many carriers demand non-destructive testing, also called NDT, using ultrasound or even X-ray to check the bolts and the keel to hull joint. That is a job for specialists, and the bill often lands between $1,500 and $4,000. If the owner cannot produce a recent NDT report showing sound bolts, the underwriter has two options: exclude the keel from the policy or decline hull coverage altogether. Some may offer liability only, but that leaves the owner exposed for any structural failure. The Benetto First 456 is not sunk by age or neglect, but by the invisible risk hidden inside its keel, a risk that now requires expensive proof, or the boat becomes a self-insured gamble. Morgan. Out Island 41s have a reputation for ruggedness, but insurers look past the legend and ask one question: when was the standing rigging last replaced? The industry standard is simple. If the rigging is over 15 years old and you cannot produce a dated receipt or a professional inspection report, the mast is effectively invisible to the policy. Underwriters treat old wire as a loaded spring. Years of charter service, salt, and deferred maintenance mean even a single missing invoice can push the application into a dead end. For boats that once carried families across the Caribbean, this paperwork hurdle now blocks coverage for the most valuable part of the boat. Without proof of a complete re-rig within the last 15 years, most carriers will either exclude the mast and rig from hull coverage or refuse to insure the boat for offshore use at all. Some might offer liability only, but that leaves the owner exposed to the full cost of a dismasting or rig failure. The logic is cold. A failed mast at sea is a catastrophic loss, and without recent documentation, the risk is unquantifiable. This is not just a technicality. In today's market, the absence of a 15-year rig receipt is enough to sink a deal. Buyers and sellers alike are finding out that what matters most is not the boat's sailing history, but the paperwork in the folder. For the Morgan Out Island 41, the rigging clock is always ticking, and when it runs out, so does the hope of full insurance. Pearson's 365, first launched in 1976, stands as a reminder that sometimes the biggest risk is written in the calendar. The 40-year rule has become a quiet gatekeeper in the insurance world. Once a boat crosses that age line, most carriers stop offering agreed value hull policies. Instead, they default to actual cash value, or ACV, a number that rarely matches the cost of a serious repair, let alone a total loss. For a 1976 Pearson 365, actual cash value might mean a payout that barely covers salvage, with nothing left for a replacement or even a meaningful repair. The difference is more than paperwork. Agreed value sets a fixed payout, based on survey and negotiation, locking in a sum the owner can count on if disaster strikes. Actual cash value, on the other hand, is a moving target. It is the depreciated market value at the time of loss, subject to the insurer's interpretation and the whims of the used boat market. On a nearly 50-year-old hull, that can mean a check for a fraction of the cost to refit, or worse, nothing if the boat is labeled obsolete or unmarketable. Specialty insurers and classic boat programs still exist, but they are few and far between, often demanding pristine surveys and strict compliance with every recommendation. For most buyers, the reality is stark. The moment the hull's birthday crosses 40, the insurance market hollows out. The boat may be sound, the system's updated, but the policy math does not care. The 40-year rule quietly turns a well-loved Pearson 365 into a financial orphan, insured for liability, but left exposed for any real loss. Hunter 450 owners in Florida are finding out the hard way that sometimes the boat's biggest liability is not the hull, it is the zip code. After a string of devastating hurricane seasons, insurers have started capping their exposure in high-risk coastal areas. They are not just raising rates, they are pulling out of entire counties. In places like Key West, Fort Lauderdale, and the Southwest Gulf Coast, non-renewal letters are landing in mailboxes by the hundreds. The message is blunt: your boat is unwanted in the portfolio, not because of what it is, but where it sits. This is called capacity shedding. Underwriters look at their books and see too many older, mass-market cruisers clustered in the same hurricane-prone marinas. The Hunter 450, a popular choice for liveaboards and charter fleets, becomes a casualty of numbers. When the exposure cap is hit, the oldest and most common models are the first to go. It does not matter if your survey is spotless or if you have kept up with every maintenance item. If your hull is registered in a flagged zip code, the insurer's answer is often a flat no for hull coverage. Some carriers will offer liability-only policies, just enough to keep your slip at the marina, but even that can be at risk. Certain marinas now require proof of full hull and salvage coverage, and without it, eviction notices follow the non-renewal letters. The result is a forced migration. Owners scramble to move boats inland, haul out for hurricane season, or accept the risk of self-insuring a six-figure asset. New buyers are blindsided when the seller's policy dies at closing, and the marina will not accept their liability-only binder. For the Hunter 450 in Florida, it is not a question of condition or care. It is a numbers game, and the only way to win is to get out of the high-risk zone, or accept that on paper, your dream boat is now a financial orphan. Gemini 105M. Catamarans have long promised affordable cruising and easy upgrades, but today that promise comes with a catch. The risk is not in the hull or the rig, it is behind the electrical panel. Lithium installations are the new battleground. Over the last decade, owners have packed these boats with lithium battery banks, high-output inverters, and solar charge controllers. The problem is most of these upgrades are done outside the standards of the American Boat and Yacht Council, known as ABYC, specifically Standard E13, which governs lithium installations. For underwriters, this is not a gray area. It is a binary pass or fail. Insurance applications now ask directly, are there lithium batteries, and was the install done by an ABYC certified technician? If the answer is no, or if a survey flags non-compliant wiring, the file lands in the reject pile. The risk is clear. Lithium batteries that lack proper battery management systems, overcurrent protection, or containment can enter thermal runaway. A fire in a Gemini's tight hull spaces is often a total loss, and insurers have seen enough claims to treat undocumented, do-it-yourself lithium as a red flag. Surveyors are explicit. Reports that state the lithium installation does not meet American Boat and Yacht Council E13, that it is a fire hazard, and that correction by a qualified electrician is recommended are almost guaranteed to trigger a denial. Some carriers may offer a liability-only policy to satisfy a marina, but hull and fire coverage are off the table. If a fire occurs and the insurer finds non-compliant lithium at the heart of the system, they can void the policy entirely, leaving the owner with nothing but a salvage bill. There is a way back. Compliance with American Boat and Yacht Council E13 is not a technicality, it is the paperwork that restores insurability. A certified installer invoice, a surveyor's note of full compliance, and photos of proper containment and fusing can move the file from automatic decline to conditional approval. For Gemini 105M owners, this is the new reality. The difference between an insurable asset and a financial time bomb comes down to a standards checklist. No ABYC E13, no hull policy. That is not a threat, it is the actuarial truth. Across all 10 entries, one pattern stands out. In today's insurance market, what sinks a sailboat is not storms or the sea, it is invisible risk on paper. Age, hidden flaws, and even your marina's zip code can turn a classic cruiser into a financial trap overnight. The real voyage now starts with the underwriter, not the helm. Have you hit a dead end with insurance? Share your story below.